In case you were wondering, no, I'll never be able to avoid my own spells. Hello crew and welcome to the pirate spaceship. Today we're gonna go through the second half of tips and tricks for the first chapter of Pathfinder Kingmaker. If you missed the previous videos of the series, go check them out. Otherwise, let's get started. From the characters cards menu, you can manage the characters currently in your party. You can use this menu to choose which character to control when you're going around, you can make them sneak around, you can make them hold their position, and link them or unlink them from the main group. You can also use this menu to switch between characters in other menus like equipment, inventory, and spellbook, which is pretty comfy when you want to upgrade the whole party, or when buying equipment to quickly figure out who can equip what you're buying. Theoretically, you should only see the cards of characters in your current party, but in practice when you are at your HQ, if you first navigate to one of the other menus, you will be able to rotate between all of the characters. And if when you close the menu the camera spams you somewhere random, you probably have another character selected and just need to switch back to your PC. Which character you control when exploring has basically as only effect to have them talk as you move, which can be nice if you wanna hear how Tristan unknowingly friendzone the girl. Also, the character you control is often gonna be the closest to the enemies when you start the fight, and is also likely gonna be the first one to run into traps. So if you're controlling someone without a decent perception skill, maybe don't rush forward leaving the party behind. When your characters are sneaking around, they are gonna move at half their default speed, and this applies in battle too while they remain undetected. But their chances to be discovered by enemies are lower, and there is a higher chance that you're gonna get an advantage round if you engage in a fight. Also, being undetected allows some characters to strike sneak attacks, but your characters will get detected once they attack. Linking and unlinking characters from the group and having them hold their position is gonna be really useful in fights in terms of formation and to solve some puzzles scattered around dungeons. Which reminds me, there are some small enigmas to solve in some locations. They tend to be simple, and they usually give access to some special loot. So if you see something that you can interact with, there is probably a reason behind it. Back to menus, on the other menu you will have a lot of useful tabs. First we have the equipment, where you can set weapons, clothes, accessories, and magical objects for your characters to use. In the inventory you can see all the stuff that you currently own, and we are gonna get into detail later. From the spellbook you can see all the spells that your characters know, and set the ones currently available for characters with spell slots. From the journal you can keep track of all of your tasks and missions, and in the encyclopedia you can find info about everything game related. From the group manager tab you can change your current party while you're around, and in the formation tab you can set the formation that your party is gonna take in a fight. You can either pick a pre-made formation or you can create your own. More about this later in the tips for combat. From the characters tab you can access all the information about your characters at any time. You can check their skills, stats, story, alignment, so on and so forth. Conditions can come from a very wide range of things, such as spells, poisons, weapons and wounds, diseases, curses, quality of the food, the weather. I think you got the idea. From the characters tab you can consult them and figure out how much they are affecting your characters, and maybe how to remove them. There are usually spells to solve all conditions, but for chapter 1 the easiest way is gonna be resting, often at Oleg's. These conditions can affect your game quite a bunch. For example, in a Tempest your characters will have reduced visibility and movement speed, so keep track of them and try to keep your characters safe. You can live with some conditions, but try to keep them controlled so you don't end up randomly losing a character. Among the conditions you will get, the most common is fatigue. While fatigued, your characters take a -2 penalty to strength and dexterity and they won't be able to charge. And if you ignore fatigue, after a while your characters will get exhausted, which results in a -6 penalty to strength and dexterity, moving at half speed, and a longer resting time to get the condition away. But if you're traveling from the moment your characters get fatigued, you can keep traveling a bit longer. To remove fatigue, you will have to rest. And while you're out exploring, that means camping. And this is what the rest tab is for. There are various roles when camping that depend on specific skills, and you can assign up to 2 characters to each role. The first is hunting, that is based on a character's knowledge of nature. This role is optional. If you have rations in your inventory, you can use those instead. The game is still gonna tell you that the hunters came back empty-handed, as if you failed the hunting check, but hunting can take a bunch of hours, which you're gonna save by using rations, and you're gonna save a party member that you can use for another role. So try to bring as many supplies as you can. You will also need to appoint someone to cook, which is based on knowledge of the world. Here you can also pick a specific dish to prepare. You will start with only the hearty meal option, but you will find more recipes around, which are easy to identify. To learn them though, you will need to go to your inventory, select the recipe, and do copy recipe. All recipes give you a special bonus for the coming day if prepared well, and all of them have a different difficulty, measured by the cooking DC. Also, all the recipes besides the hearty meal will require some ingredients to prepare, so you will need to have them in your inventory for the cook to succeed. I would say in general recipes are a decent purchase to make from merchants. They aren't expensive and they add to the possible bonuses that you can use for the day. For what concerns ingredients, you won't need to buy much in the first chapter because you will find most of the ingredients you need by looting. Then you can appoint someone to camouflage the camp, which is based on stealth, and someone to guard. This has 2 turns, so it will take up 2 characters, and is based on perception. If you have any spare party members, you can use their special abilities. For example, Valerie adds 1 to her AC for a day, and Christian can increase the amount of healing and regeneration that happens overnight. You can camp both from the map or from inside a location, but you won't be able to camp too close to enemies. You can also camp in dungeons, but it will not be possible to hunt, so you will have to have supplies with you. Even when camping, everything depends on RNGesus and dice rolls against environmental stats. In general, the more filled with enemies and evil a place is, the harder it will be to camp there safely. So try to keep away of those to lower your chances of being attacked. So for example, if you need to recover while you are halfway through clearing a location, it might be worth it to get out in the map and camp there, and then going back. Not like me at Old Sycamore, when I got a night visit from this wolf who obliterated my team in 1 turn. Or if you're in a dungeon, rest either on a floor that you have cleared completely, or if that's not possible, in a cleared section just before the door possibly closed to another area. When camping, characters will rest and heal from conditions, even though not entirely. Some skill damage can take days to remove completely. And they will also talk to each other, which is a cute way to see more of their personalities. If you are attacked during the night, your characters will be partially restored. They might have gained some HP back, but usually their spells are still not recharged. And usually they will start at a disadvantage, laying down. Once the enemies are defeated, then they can go back to rest, where they will finish healing and recharging spells. The main game loop at this point will be start at Oleg, buy some supplies, and go on an adventure for 3 or 4 days. Explore places, kill enemies, follow the story, and loot everything. Go back to Oleg, upgrade your character's equipment, leave important stuff in your stash, sell the rest of the stuff to Oleg, buy more supplies, and go again. You will be bound to go back to Oleg at times, because your inventory will not be big enough to carry everything, and your characters could suffer from some conditions that can only be removed by resting at your HQ. For example, Death Door, when a character barely escaped death, and if they die again, they're dead for good. About Oleg and Boken as merchants, you won't really need to buy much from them. Save some money to get yourself Oleg's small bag of holding, which gives you an extra 100 libers allowance in the inventory. Buy some rope, because it always comes in handy. And get yourself that seasoned wings and ties recipe, cause it's gonna give your characters some extra HPs for a day, which is always nice. Besides that, you can get some extra acid flasks and alchemist fire from Boken, but you won't really need anything else. You can find more useful equipment when exploring, and the cool weapons really will start to come out after chapter 1. The inventory is divided in sections. The first is the All tab, where you can see everything that's in your inventory. The second is for weapons, and the third for armor, robes, and shields. From this tab, feel free to sell everything that you don't need for your characters. Maybe just keeping enhanced or special items. Then you have one tab for accessories like belts, shoes, rings, and similar. And here for this chapter I would keep things that can give your characters some bonuses. While I would sell all the jewelry that just says that a merchant will pay well for it to get some extra gold. The fourth tab is for scrolls, potions, and magical devices, from which honestly I barely sell anything, cause you never know which enemies you're gonna meet next. And the fifth one is for special lore objects, from which I would say to not sell anything, cause from chapter 2 you're gonna be able to trade them for more gold and some stories. The last tab is for miscellaneous objects, from cooking ingredients and camping supplies to books, gems, and pelts. Here I would sell trinkets and items that say that a merchant would pay well for them, but I personally keep all the books, letters, and notes because there is a good amount of lore hidden into them. You can find things like letters explaining your surroundings, like for this bugged leafy monster up here, books and journals written by your characters, or even just general information that could be useful further in the game. Also, you could find some hints to solve puzzles or access as special rewards. About inventory weight, you will be able to see this in the inventory tab and in the sell by menu of merchants. In general, overloading the inventory will result in your characters taking penalties when moving and getting tired faster, sometimes also forcing you to leave loot behind, since the game won't let you leave a location if you're overloaded. If you have to leave loot behind, leave the heaviest and cheapest items, usually simple armor and shields. If you leave loot in a location on the map, you will be able to pick it up when you go back, but this doesn't apply to wilderness encounters. Also, when you're at Oleg, you're alone, so the counter you see there is for your character's inventory, while when you're traveling, the game keeps track of your whole party's inventory, which I think is based on the constitution of your characters. So overloading your inventory at Oleg doesn't mean the party will be overloaded. Now let's talk a bit about combat. Don't hold back with spells, poisons, feasts and stuff. Attack and build stats as much as possible. When I started the game, I had a tendency to waste turns or spend them trying to do simple attacks only with all the characters, because I felt like I was gonna run out of spells and items too fast. Well, you are gonna have to rest quite often anyways at the start, mainly to heal, so might as well go all out and use those spells. And for items, as you start exploring locations, you will be able to loot a bunch of them. Try to keep the most powerful things for tougher enemies, but at the end of the day, especially when your HPs are low, give it all you've got. Keep a nice variety of weapons for each character. There are a lot of types of weapons, all with their own characteristics, and you will see most of them from chapter 2, but you are already gonna be able to spice things up a bit. Try to make most characters have weapons with varied damage type, like bludgeoning, slashing and piercing. Try to include weapons of different materials in your sets, like silver and cold iron. You are bound to run into enemies with resistance to specific types of weapon, so you'd better be prepared to every occasion, unlike me against this werewolf. If you want to dual wield, it's possible, but it will need a couple of things to work properly. First, you're gonna need light weapons. Dual wielding brings a -6 penalty to attacks with your primary hand, and -10 for the other hand. If your offhand weapon is light, both penalties are reduced by 2. Then you're gonna need the 2-weapon fighting feat. That will reduce the penalties even further. Same applies to spells and abilities. Try to keep them varied. Do not underestimate the small ones that you can spend as free actions, or that can improve your stats or worsen the enemies, because when you run into enemies with some mental stats like a very high armor class, those are gonna make the fights a bit easier. Also, don't disregard healing and removing adverse effects. In terms of healing, you're usually sorted with a cleric in the party, but it's comfy if someone else can do some healing too, or if your cleric dies, you're sort of screwed. There are several spells that can be used to resist or remove adverse effects. Some enemies are gonna have really annoying abilities, like Cause Fear, that will cause your character to run away for a couple of rounds, and will likely take another couple to bring them back. So having Tristian or Harim with the ability to remove fear will be very useful. There are a lot of effects and spells in the game that can just knock out your characters, so having boosts to morale and saving throws is gonna help you out. Also, mix the types of elements for your spells. There are 5 elements in the game, namely cold or ice, sonic, fire, electricity and acid. Having some cantrips from all the categories will help you be prepared for any type of enemy, be it a water hydra or a swarm of tiny spiders. Oh, and make sure you keep some magic missiles ready in some way, cause it's the only spell that works on will-o-wisps. Change the learned spells and the equipped items and potions based on the situation. For example, if you're going in a dungeon full of poisoning spiders, it might be worth it to have at least 1 spell slot reserved for resistance or protection to poison, while you can save those slots for something else in other situations. Also, don't feel too limited by the amount of spells available for magic-based characters. There are a lot of ways to increase the spells available for a day, besides the ones given by race, class and stats. Some characters can gain more usages through feats when leveling up. For example, for Regongar you can increase the number of points in the mage pool, and for Tristian you can add extra channeling to make him gain a couple of extra healing per day. You can equip characters with scrolls and magical wands, with the main difference there being that wands have more usages but are usually less powerful than the spell. And with time you're gonna find equipment and weapons that give the wearer the ability to cast some spells or enhance particular spells, like the hat of channel positive and negative energy. For what concerns scrolls, you can use them to cast, but you can also use them to teach spells to your characters. Go to the inventory, select a scroll for a spell available to your character, but that they don't know yet, and choose Copy to Spellbook. Then you will be able to see it there and use it in the spell slot. Pay attention to the formation, but not only in terms of literal formation, which which is not worth that much to be honest, because when you have your characters running around in a dungeon, they get all mixed up anyways, as much as the strategy on the battleground. Observe how the enemy fights and adapt to it. If you're against alchemists that throw a fuck ton of bombs, try not to group all of your characters together or they will become a super easy target, but keep them close to enemy characters instead so that the bombs will damage them as well. If you have enemies that can go only a short distance, keep your characters separated and wide open so you can avoid a good deal of damage. Consider carefully how to use your resources. When against a big number of enemies, focus on taking them down a pair at a time rather than doing distributed damage, because you will take less hits per turn as their numbers go down. Or if there is an annoyingly strong enemy in front of you, focus on them first. And this is especially true with summoners, because getting rid of them will also dispel all the summoned creatures. Also, position on the map during fights will impact the way your character hits. For example, flanking opponents will give an advantage in attacks and increase the chances of attacks of opportunity. Most ranged characters can perform sneak attacks on vulnerable enemies, and they benefit from a clear path to the opponent, but they can't be used for flanking or attacks of opportunity. Instead, they will trigger the opponent's attack of opportunity if they try to attack while too close to a melee enemy. So essentially, keep your ranged characters away from enemies and place melee characters near ranged enemies. Now let's go to the options menu, because to make your experience of the game a bit better, there are a couple of things you might want to change. First, go to the sound menu and tick the option to remove pauses between tracks in turn-based mode, because the music is great at setting the atmosphere, and if you play in turn-based mode, this will remove the weird silence breaks during fights. Then you might want to take down the frequency of characters' remarks. While I like that the type of voice decided in character creation also determined the personality of the character and the sentences that they say, my resting bitch face got annoying very fast. Like, okay, she's meant to be confident, but she doesn't need to remind me every 5 seconds that her skills are absolute. So yeah, I wouldn't remove it completely because it's nice to hear your characters say things every once in a while, but you might want to take it down to rarely. And finally, go to the save options and add yourself some saving slots. One of the most important things to do in this game is saving. The game is difficult and random numbers can be very unforgiving, so save and do it often, especially if you have some important skill check to pass or if something goes particularly well. I find 3 slots for autosaves and 3 for quick saves works kinda well for me, even though the autosaves could be a bit more because the game saves very often. You can always make manual saves on top of those, but autosaves and quick saves are gonna be pretty comfortable. Finally, let's talk a bit about bugs. There are a bunch of them scattered around the game, and I'm gonna get back into this in the next video, because it gets worse the more you progress in the game. But in chapter 1 it goes relatively smooth. From most bugs you can recover by opening and closing some menu, like when the fighting interface completely disappears, or at least most of the times. Then there are smaller and funny bugs, like the cutscene at Old Sycamore for me started looping and the dude kept repeating the same sentence over and over. And the most beautiful bug I found in chapter 1 was against this wizard who kept summoning wolves, who at some point decided to turn against the summoners and won me the fight. I really wasn't gonna win this otherwise. So yeah, expect bugs to happen and save often for your mental health, but you should be able to get through chapter 1 without too much extra trouble. And that's it for today and for this chapter. I hope you found some of the tips useful and have fun establishing your barony. If you liked the video, consider leaving us a like, a comment, or subscribing to our channel. Most of the tips and tricks will apply to the following chapters of the game too, but we will get into details in the next and last video of the series, where we will cover how the game evolves, how to manage your barony, and DLCs. It might be a while before that, because I'm just reaching the last chapter of the game now. But meanwhile, we have some new ideas here in the pirate spaceship, so stay tuned to see what's next. A goodbye from the pirate spaceship, and till the next one, fare thee well.